Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us in our second session today of the Immersion Day. And I see some familiar names from our previous session, so that's awesome. So before we get started, some quick introductions. I am Pei Yi from the AWS Startup Sales Team. And together with me, I have Vikas, Senior Solutions Architect, specialized in analytics, who's our speaker today, and Yudo, who's our AWS Startup Solutions Architect, who will be our moderator for the day. So we also have our co-organizers of the event, Aspire Next, who has been a great support in operationalizing the event. So thank you for taking the time to join us as mentioned. And today what we'll be covering is on how can we leverage on our data assets to not just make higher quality business decisions, but to optimize on your customers' experience and earn their trust, and how we can then support you in that journey. So we would like for this session to be as helpful and as engaging. So please do share your questions in the Zoom chat, and we'll have Vikas and Yudo address them at the end of the session. We'll also be recording the session to share the resource post-event. So without further ado, I pass the time now to Vikas to do a bit more introductions of himself and get kick-started.
Hey everyone. Okay, can I start sharing my screen?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
Just give me a second. Let me bring my screen. Hello everyone. Hope you guys are able to hear me well. Thank you for taking the time from your busy schedules and attending this session. What I'm going to do is I'm just quickly going to turn on my video so that you know you are not speaking to a bot. I hope you can see me. And technology is so advanced. I always start showing up my face in the beginning so that people understand they are not listening to a recorded version or talking to a robot. Okay, I'll turn off my video. And a little bit about myself. My name is Vikas Homer, and I'm a specialist solutions architect with data analytics team at AWS. I've been working on data platforms since last 12 years or so, and the journey has been pretty exciting so far. I've been fortunate enough to work with some of the biggest enterprises to some of the incubating startups, being a part to one of them myself. In my role at AWS, I follow my passion of helping customers get the most out of their data assets. I have an exciting agenda lined up for you today. We'll look at opportunities for improvement in supply chain and logistics industry, go through 2 case studies and talk about how they are making use of data to drive their business and innovate at the same time. We will also look at what a modern data platform looks like. We'll look at AWS Analytics Stack. We'll also see some of the analytics concepts in action through a demo, and then finally leave some time for Q&A. I am sure you have seen this picture so many times so far, but I would like to kick off this session by quoting what Suhail Doshi, CEO of Mixpanel, said. He quoted, "Most of the world will make decisions by either guessing or using their gut. They will be either lucky or wrong." Interestingly true, actually. So this is the world of data, and we know data is a strategic asset for every organization. It has gone from being something that was cumbersome and expensive to store to becoming the lifeblood of many companies' business model. So if you are able to store every relevant data point about your business and have the ability to analyze all of that data in different ways and distill the data down to insights for your business, it will fuel innovation in your organization, which can lead to a competitive advantage. Companies today are using data to drive decisions when to offer new product offerings, like introducing new revenue streams, automating manual processes, earning customer tests, etc., etc. All of these decisions can fuel innovation and drive your business forward. We'll look at a couple of customer case studies in a few slides from now. But at the same time, customers are also facing new challenges in managing and analyzing their data. So we always hear from companies that they are looking to extract more value from their data, but struggle to capture, store, and analyze all the data generated by today's modern and digital businesses. Data is growing exponentially, coming from new sources, is increasingly diverse, Like if you look at social media things, they were not a thing a few years back, but today they are, like they play an important role in our lives. And all these data sources requirements need to be securely accessed and analyzed by a number of applications as well as people. Data is the core behind every business and every decision. So just quoting what Gartner said, that number one technology area where CIOs are increasing investment is business intelligence or data analytics solution. The same report also says that 63% of CEOs, they are likely to make a change to the business model over the next 2 years and perform analytics prior to, during, and after changes of this magnitude. It is paramount to measure return on investment for any kind of digital initiatives you are taking, because if you aren't measuring it, you are not taking it seriously. There is always some KPIs or metrics you want to measure on your investments and initiatives. So these challenges are valid for any industry, but every challenge is an opportunity as well. Let's take a 10,000 feet view across three main business imperatives in supply chain and logistics industry. That is improve operational efficiency, end-to-end supply chain visibility, and improving customer satisfaction. If you look at any business, I think more or less all the business wants to excel in these three fields. And all these opportunities are kind of interlinked as well. You improve one business KPI and the other area also starts showing some positive impact. In my own personal experience, where I've spent most of the time working with telecom operators, these use cases are super important to provide better services to their customers and be operationally efficient at the same time. Although SCM and logistics is not their mainstream business, but still a significant part of it. For example, maintaining inventory of spare parts for the network based on insights from predictive network maintenance and forecasting, truck roll optimization for operations, delivering and installing devices at customer premises, etc., etc. So if you look at these three pillars, you have a layer for improving customer satisfaction where you might want to build a customer 360, for example, to have end-to-end visibility what your customer is going through. And it's not always about customers. Sometimes you also want to do a 360 for your vendors, for carriers, or any kind of key business entity in your business. The second one is around operational side of things, where you want to do optimization. You want to have visibility on end-to-end processes and automate certain things. For example, optimization around truck rolls or routing optimizations. You want to deploy more and more sensors to collect more and more information so that you can make informed decisions. You also want to manage your contract lifecycle management for vendors and carriers you are choosing to opt with. In terms of so for supply chain business, basically it's a lot of demand and supply, right? So you have enough data. If you can predict or forecast your supply and demand kind of a bit accurate, then you have much more leverage on using that data to your own good. It will improve and show improvement in KPIs you're measuring over time. Predictive maintenance is almost true in any kind of business where you want to resolve things before anything can happen. And that also lets you optimize some of the maintenance tasks where you don't have to go several kilometers or hundreds of kilometers just to fix anything when it breaks, because it also brings some kind of downtime to the business. Then the other is inventory optimization. So if you look at all these things, they are kind of interlinked, and putting your data to work is key to excel in all these areas. Let's look at two organizations who have put their data to achieve key business outcomes for them. Let me quickly talk about two interesting customer case studies. First one is about Parcel Perform. Maybe you have heard the name. It's a startup. It helps e-commerce merchants to deliver a better post-purchase experience through e-commerce logistic data and integration platform. If we think about e-commerce business, it could be so easy. A consumer places an order, the merchant hands over the parcel to the carrier, and the carrier delivers it to the customer. What could possibly go wrong? It seems pretty easy, but reality looks very different from this. Merchant need to work with number of carriers as they have different product categories. They ship to different locations or simply do not want to rely just on one service provider. That's where the problem starts. So the biggest problem is like having end-to-end visibility, and it's not there for merchants and either for customers. So they both are frustrated. The second one is around multi-vendor integrations. You have multiple integration points, and this also brings tech sophistication. The fourth point is high customer service cost. So when you have multiple vendors, you don't have an streamlined end-to-end process. It also brings you high customer service cost. Probably you're outsourcing this today, or if you're taking care of it on, you're actually investing huge amount of resources from your side. So overall, it becomes a frustrating experience for everyone involved with high friction and high cost. Parcel Perform aims to change that. Parcel Perform uses AWS analytics and ML solutions to structure the data and predict date of package arrival. Overall, they have improved customer lifetime value and retention rate by 40%, enabled delivery data prediction with ML, and have built a platform that scales to support an 80% spike in system traffic. At one of their largest customers, they were able to accurately predict the delivery date in about 91% of the cases, and then update notifications. This number moved to 96% right before delivery. And just to let you know, guys, Parcel Perform closely work with AWS on solving this challenge. Second case study I want to talk about is about Siemens. I picked this one over the others because I want you all to relate where AWS can help, no matter if it's a switch, rail, or a vehicle. It belongs to transportation industry and it can help anyone. So in rail, rail customer satisfaction will always depend mainly on the answer to one question: are the trains running on time? Factors that could delay a train's arrival includes what industry calls as rail defects, for example, stresses and fractures in track materials or other infrastructure components. Rail system operators are always looking to efficient ways to find and correct such issues. Siemens is a leader in transport solutions for more than 160 years. The company constantly seek opportunities to innovate the offering of its core lines of business, like rolling stock, rail automation and electrification, turnkey systems, intelligent traffic systems, and other related services. Finding rail defects once required manual assessment by inspectors, walking down the tracks, or reviewing footage shot from inspection trains. But both approaches were costly, time consuming, and error prone. Siemens centralizes their data preparation task today while enabling a broad range of teams to make use of data. On AWS, they use a small centralized team for data ETL, structuring and enrichment, and then they make the data available even for non-technical employees to experiment with and build on. Now there is a new method which they use, they call it Video Track Inspector. The new solution still uses the train-mounted HD video cameras, but it replaces manual review with machine learning algorithms that not just analyze the image, but also identifies and geolocate defects and issues work orders as well. So they have automated the entire process. With this solution, Siemens customers are already seeing 10 to 15% reduction in maintenance cost and energy consumption, 30 to 50% decrease in unplanned maintenance, and a more than 30% drop in unnecessary transfers to maintenance. Now we know how companies like Parcel Perform and Siemens have used data to solve business challenges and open doors for innovation. The biggest challenge is that most of the organizations start with good intentions of making data as an asset or a product, let's say, that will drive their business upwards and onwards, but instead end up creating another liability for themselves. What is common in most successful companies today? It's the way they put the data to work for them. They build modern data platforms to harness the power of data. So let's understand what modern data platform traits are. But before we jump into this, we want to just quickly ask you two questions, which will help us understand where you are in your journey today. So can we please have the poll question? So if you can respond to these two questions, I think, I don't know if you are seeing the two questions at the same time or no, but You have 30 seconds. Please respond to it so that I can also tailor my some next few minutes in the meeting more appropriately to you.
Everyone can see both at the same time because.
Okay, great. We have got like 9 responses so far. I think it stopped. Nobody's responding anymore. Can we have the results, please? I also want to showcase what people responded. Okay, so in the audience, you are running the business using analytics. You have embedded analytics into your organization. Data monetization is something which you are not doing. Okay, and which stage do you aspire to be in next 1 year of time? So most of you say that we still want to run the business, embed analytics inside all our processes. But most of you said that 44% of you said that data monetization is one area which you want to take a look at. Yeah, I think I'll cover some data monetization aspects in the presentation as well. Okay, thanks for the polls. Maybe we can move on. Okay. So, we are talking about modern data platform. So your modern data platform serves 4 main purposes, and that you can see in the 4 corners here. So what these are? So the first one is accelerate pace of innovation by creating data-driven products. I repeat, data-driven products. Generate new revenue streams and boost time to insights, action, market, and value. The second one is around delivering excellent customer experience through the use of data, whether it's by building 360 views of key business entities, doing hyper personalization for your customers, proactive care, mapping out customer journeys and call center automation, digitizing journeys or interactions via applications and chatbots. It depends on which problem you are trying to solve, but all of these problems can be solved with data. And then it will take your organization to another level in terms of customer experience. The third one is around empowering entire ecosystem with self-service culture, whether via ML-powered visualization tools or by making data discoverable. The fourth one is around democratizing data and AI/ML with governance in place. As you grow, it's of utmost importance that the foundation of your platform is rock solid from security and governance point of view. It allows you to scale and innovate at a much faster clip. All these 4 pillars are very much aligned to what you can do with cloud ecosystem and especially with AWS. So I'm going to touch upon some of the key benefits when you are onto cloud. I'm not sure if everyone here in the audience is familiar with AWS, but I'll touch on this real quick. The first one is around pay per use, which only lets you pay for what you use, not what you intend to use in the future or what you are not use in the future, but you've already procured. So on the actual basis. The second one is around scalability. It helps you scale your workloads and not to worry about sizing for that peak traffic on-prem. The other one is around elasticity. So scalability is one thing, but elasticity allows you to grow and shrink at the same time. So if you are catering your peak traffic, but for the rest of the day, it's all like average. So you can come back to normal, like discard resources which you are not using. The other one is around rich ecosystem. So you shouldn't be actually running after so many vendors if you are building a single ecosystem use case and then ask your users to go to so many different places for doing that use case. So the platform should be rich enough. It should provide you all the depth and breadth of tools that you might require to innovate. The other one is around simplicity. So AWS has a lot of managed services where AWS takes care of all the undifferentiated heavy lifting for our customers and let them focus only on their key business goals. There are some serverless offerings. I'm not going to take any names right now. You'll see in the demo. Then you have performance. That performance matters, right? So with state-of-the-art infrastructure and options, you get best price performance out there. So it's not only about performance, but it also getting that performance at the lowest possible cost. And finally, you can run build and run a lot of use cases on AWS. any use case which you can imagine of, from analytics to ML to blockchain, to going to some extreme machine learning capabilities using GPU instances, everything you can do on AWS. Okay, moving on. I just want to dive a bit deeper into some of the benefits of the cloud, so you you understand what it means to bring your workloads to cloud or start building on cloud. So first one is something which we briefly touched: scale, elasticity, and flexibility. You know, before cloud computing, you had to over provision infrastructure to ensure you had enough capacity to handle your business operations at the peak level of activity. And I'm sure most of you who are in the call will relate to it. We always do sizing for the peak on-prem, and we always keep some buffer as well. Now, you can provision on cloud the amount of resources that you actually need, knowing you can instantly scale up or scale down with the needs of your business. So this reduces cost and improve your ability to meet your user demands. You have the agility to test new solutions quickly and easily. Like your power of experimentation becomes a lot faster and better. If you remember from the parcel perform case study we discussed, they scale up to 80% and cater to that 80% spike in traffic through auto scaling. And once that is done, they come back to their average workload capacity. The one important aspect is pay as you go. With these flexibilities, it's also important that you're not paying for what you're not using. This allows you to trade capital expense, for example, data centers, physical servers, etc., for variable expense, and only pay for IT as you consume it. Plus, the variable expense is much lower than what you do yourself because of the larger economies of scale. It's estimated that by 2022, most of the essential 90% of data analytics innovation will be centered around public cloud services. The other one is around purpose built. So AWS offers you broadest and deepest set of analytics and AI/ML services. It allows you to use the right tool for the right workload. It also kind of provide you various options and support. I'll cover this in much more detail in next couple of slides probably. The third one is around fully managed. So the cloud allows you to innovate faster because you can focus your valuable IT resources on strategic and value added activity that differentiate your business and transform customer experiences. For example, instead of managing backups and patches, you can spend the same amount of time building deeper analytics solutions, from dashboards to provide near real-time BI to more users across the business, to data models that can be used by business analysts that data scientists have come up with to predict the direction of the market, or do demand forecast, or do predictive maintenance use cases. It gives you kinds of way forward to keep you, your company, and your customers stay ahead of the competition. Now, traditional methods of working with data might still work for some of us, but it's not scalable in the long run and are definitely not helping with the pace of innovation where companies want it to be. So if I put myself on the other side of the table and question myself, okay, it all sounds good, but what does a modern data platform looks like, right? You might be having all this question in your head right now. And this is what exactly we are going to do in the next couple of minutes. But first, we need to understand why there was the need of building this in the first place. So what has happened over the last number of years, as customers have accumulated so much data, a lot of that data lives in different silos. And it's really hard to do analytics when you have to go to all those different data silos. So it's not about centralized architecture, decentralized architecture. It depends all on the use case and where your organization works. But it's important to have access to all that data in a unified manner so that you can do your analytics and machine learning on top of it. So we all got introduced to Hadoop a few years back. I think 2013 or 2014 was the time when it picked up the pace. So customers were looking for highly scalable, available, secure, and flexible data store, or you can call it a data lake that can handle extremely large data sets. With a data lake, Customers can store all their structured and unstructured data using the open data format of their own choice. For example, ORC, Parquet, which are good for analytics, and tag their data in a central searchable catalog so that it becomes discoverable. Remember, we were talking about the self-service part. It plays a crucial role here. Customers can run any type of analytics from historical reporting to ML-based predictive analytics efficiently without having to transform or move large amounts of data. So these were the thought processes in the traditional data warehousing, and it was not scalable. So we came up with data lakes, and let me go to the next slide and explain. So customers started moving to the data lake architectures and provided them with best of the both worlds. So when data lake concept was introduced, all these data warehouses also started supporting Hadoop as a method of connection. Like you can complement your data lake which you are building on-prem with your data warehouse. You don't have to store everything in data warehouse. That was the messaging. So typical pattern was to store recently or hot data on a data warehouse, store historical, cold or warm data on the data lake. But essentially it was allowing you to do data warehousing, analytics and machine learning at the same time. So a typical data stack looks like this, where we have at the bottom layer how to move data to your analytical stack. Then the other one is data lake infrastructure and management, how you organize your data, how you secure and manage your data, and then how definitely you catalog your data. Then on top of that, you run all your analytics workloads, whether it's data warehousing, big data processing, serverless data processing. I'll explain this in the next slide. What do we mean by serverless data processing, how it's different from big data processing. Interactive querying. You might have people who are coming in on ad hoc basis and want to do some analysis and go back. They are not regular users, but the workload pattern is very ad hoc. Operational analytics, real-time analytics. And then on activation layer, you can call it digital user engagement or consumption layer. You have data sharing mechanisms which you want to run on top of your analytics layer. You have reporting requirements, dashboarding requirements, like basically any kind of visualization you want to do. Then you have digital user engagement. That engagement can be in the form of emails, SMSs, paid channel integrations, social media integrations, basically any kind of channel integration which you can imagine. And then you have predictive and prescriptive analytics. So this is a wide area. Let me expand on this in the next slide. So when mapped to AWS services, the stack looks like this. So of course, we don't have time to go through each of the services, but let me quickly cover what each of these stack has to offer. So in terms of data movement, you have every sort of possible data movement you can imagine. If you want to sync your on-prem storage, that is possible. You want to move data in bulk from on-prem to AWS, that is possible. You want to sync your databases one time or on a regular basis, that is possible. You have both batch and stream data movement, which is possible. And then there are some higher level services where you don't have to do anything. Basically, the service will read the data from the source and then it will write the data into the storage layer directly with just a matter of few clicks actually. In terms of data lake infrastructure and management, you have S3/Glacier as your storage layer. We'll discuss more of it in the next slide. Then you have lake formation. So lake formation is it's a centralized governance layer, which allows you to define through a UI, database level, column level, table level, row level, cell level, and tag level permissions, like who should be accessing this kind of information. And that is made very easy with just a simple UI. Then you have AWS Glue. So AWS Glue has several functionalities. One of them is cataloging data on the data lake. So with just a few clicks, we'll also see it in the demo, you can just kind of catalog all your data. You don't have to go and figure out what's in the data. The crawler, the Glue catalog will do it for you. It generates a nice schema with a lot of metadata on top of it. In terms of analytics, Redshift is a data warehousing. We'll look at this in the detail in the demo section. We have EMR, which is Elastic MapReduce. It's a managed Hadoop, which offers you 21 open source frameworks on top of it. You can install all this with just a few clicks. You can choose the instances of your own choice and then process big data using frameworks like Spark, Flink, Hive, Presto, Tez. You also have the ability to install notebooks on it. You can also do some of the frameworks, machine learning frameworks like TensorFlow on top of it. Then you have analytics layer, Athena. It's under the hood, it uses Presto, but it's a managed service, so you don't have to do anything. Once you have data on your data lake, it's cataloged using crawler. You can simply go in and start firing ANSI SQL compliant queries using Athena. You don't have to spin up anything, just go and start querying the data. Then you have Elasticsearch service. We all are familiar with Elasticsearch service. I think it's a part of the famous ELK stack, but it's all managed on AWS. You don't have to manage anything from your side. It's a fully managed service. But Elasticsearch today is not just simply used for log analytics as well. It's also used for a lot of real-time use cases as well, where you want to maintain some sort of profile of your key business entities like vendors or customers and update the counters or KPIs in real time. You can also build real-time dashboards on top of it. Then you have Kinesis Data Analytics, which lets you do analytics on your streams of data. So it's used for streaming analytics. One use case can be how many people ordered on my app or website in the last 1 minute. So it will keep calculating that counter. Of course, it's a very simple example, I think, but enough to clarify what this service can do. Then in terms of activation layer or consumption layer, you have a lot of services. Data exchange to securely share your data internally or externally. And this is a good way of monetizing your data as well. So I definitely recommend that you look at this. You can also get a lot of free data sets, which you possibly can use here. There are a lot of open source free data sets which you can download and use directly into S3. Then you have QuickSight. QuickSight is a dashboarding BI tool on cloud. We'll discuss more about it in the demo also. We have Pinpoint, which is the digital user engagement. It lets you create campaigns, build digital user journeys, and then integrate to channels you want. Then you have SageMaker. So SageMaker is a managed machine learning which kinds of abstracts a lot of complexities at framework level and gives you simple SDK APIs to build your train and deploy your machine learning model. So it's just one service, but it has an entire suite of services. For example, SageMaker Studio is there, SageMaker Data Wrangler is there. A lot of things can be visually there, can be done. AutoML is also there. So it offers you the full MLOps capability. Then you have bunch of AI services. That's an abstraction where you can simply use all these services without training the model through an API. So you provide your input and you get the inference output. So for example, recognition for identifying objects in an image, translate for translating the language, Poly for text to speech. So all these AI services are also there to help speed up the experimentation capacity at your site. Okay, let's quickly discuss a few things about modern data lakes. I think it's important. So data lakes, the way they were introduced were very basic, like, low cost storage, and then you can store all your data at one place. That was the whole concept. But even data lake concept has evolved. When the way you do data lakes on-prem is completely different from the way you do data lakes on cloud. So for example, as I told you, S3 is the central storage layer, and then you can run any type of analytics on top of it. And then you can integrate this storage layer with any kind of incoming data. You have a bunch of options to move data also. So some of the key principles which you should know while you build your data lakes on AWS, doesn't matter if it's a small or big, because anyways you are just paying for what you use. So it doesn't matter, it has to be like really big data. So all data should be in one place, a single source of truth. Of course, pattern of this can be centralized or decentralized systems. I'll show you a decentralized pattern today with my Redshift demo. It should decouple storage and compute. In on-prem, when you had to, let's say, increase storage, even though you don't have to increase your compute, there's no requirement, but you have to buy more servers to increase that storage. On AWS, it's decoupled. Storage is separate, compute is separate. So you can store as much data as you want. And then depending on the requirement, you can have your own compute. It can be way less than the amount of data you are storing. It should handle multiple data types. structured, semi-structured, and unstructured, basically all the data types. It should support fast ingestion and consumption. So it's not just about doing batch analytics. It's also about be able to do real-time or right-time analytics. So also on the ingestion side as well as on the consumption side. It should allow schema on read. So if you are coming from using traditional databases, remember we have to define a schema first and then load it to the database. If the incoming data doesn't conform with the schema, the records are rejected. In the long run, it's not quite feasible because every time the way data is incoming, data sources are changing, new data sources are coming. It's not possible every time to go and check, right? And for some of the things, you might not have a use case because traditional databases were licensed. We were very careful in determining how much data we should store on a data warehouse or any kind of traditional database. So we used to filter out some data as well. But with data lakes, you can just simply put all your data and then worry about it later. You can always kind of catalog the data later using the help of Glue. And then if you have use cases, you can always build it later on. You don't have to go back and ask IT, oh, we weren't collecting that kind of data. We were filtering it out because of constraints on storage. Now we have to wait for 3 or 6 months to collect that data and then start your experimentation with machine learning. So schema on read is very important. It's connected to so many things. It should be designed for low cost. So in real world, data has temperature. You are collecting data over time, but it's not always true that the same data will be used across every business organization all at once. So in S3, you have tiers. For example, there is S3 standard, which is good for your frequent analytics data. Then you might have some data, for example, 2 years of data you're using frequently, but 2 to 5 years of data, you don't use it very often, but sometimes you use it. So you might move it to S3 infrequent access. Then there is Glacier and Glacier Deep Archive, which is at 1/10 of the cost of S3. And then it stores the data for archival purposes. So S3 has a lot of features that way. One of the feature I also want to just quickly highlight that S3 by default stores 3 copies of your data, and then you just have to pay for 1 copy. But in traditional on-prem environments, if you have built Hadoop or work with Hadoop environments, you have to secure storage for all 3 copies of data plus 20 to 25% buffer on top of it. In S3, it's very actual basis, very, very actual. Then the last part, the important part is it should support governance and security. Governance and security should be actually from day one, because especially for startups, you are a high pace movement growth company. And then the way you go or move forward in the journey, you might not have time to come back and change anything. But if you are doing governance from day one, the foundation is good. You don't have to come back and see if my framework was proper or not. You keep building on top of that framework, and it should cater to any kind of business organization, line of businesses, or use cases. So governance and security are quite important. And in that aspect also, S3 lake formation, and with a bunch of couple of services, it provides you great options to control that yourself. Here's a very small subset of our customers who have built their data lakes on AWS. Okay, let me explain this architecture. It might look complicated and jazzy, but there is a meaning to it. You know, data lakes and data warehouses, and in today's era where we have so many personas, so many kind of data, where customer demands are changing every now and then because of fierce competition, to accomplish real world use cases, data lakes and data warehouses are not just enough. I mean, they are part of the system, but they are not enough. So now let's discuss platforms beyond data lakes. So this is the approach of modern data platforms from AWS, where as data in these data lakes and purpose-built stores continues to grow, it becomes harder to move all this data around. We call this data gravity. To make decisions with speed and agility, customers need to be able to use a central data lake and a ring of purpose-built data services around that data lake. They also need to acknowledge data gravity by easily moving the data they need between these data sources in a secure and governed way. So what are these use cases that will require purpose-built data services? So I think data warehousing use cases, we are all aware, standardized BI reports, or you want to organize data in a very structured way, data marts. So Redshift data warehouses comes there. Log and operational analytics or any kind of real-time computation metrics you can store in Elasticsearch. You can process all your big data with EMR, let's say. You also might have data, I mean, not might, you will have data which are transactional in nature and they need to reside in a relational database. You also might have consumer facing applications which want to connect to a data source to get information and also update information back to the system using a NoSQL database like DynamoDB that offers you a bunch of options, and then you can securely share data with applications in sub millisecond level, like less than it's a millisecond, single digit millisecond latency. The other one is definitely machine learning. So all that data, probably you are crunching it in a data warehouse, you are doing some enrichment, or your data is lying on S3, or you are doing some transformations using big data. So machine learning framework like SageMaker should be able to talk to all these services to come up with that machine learning model. And sometimes you centralize data on S3, sometimes it's not possible because the data is updating in real time, and you might want to access data from source itself. That is something which we'll see in the demo. Okay. So we call this modern approach to analytics the lakehouse architecture. So what is essentially a lakehouse architecture from AWS standpoint? A lakehouse architecture acknowledges the idea that a one size fits all approach to analytics eventually lead to compromises. If you are putting everything in one and only single place, it might become a bottleneck and it might not be the best option where you can run that particular kind of use case. So it's not simply about integrating a data lake with a data warehouse, but rather about integrating a data lake, a data warehouse, and purpose-built data stores, and enabling unified governance and easy data movement. So this is what a modern data platform looks like. Of course, you can adopt it to your own use case. I am working with customers who have built Customer 360 using this architectural pattern. They are providing end-to-end supply chain visibility and powering everything with analytics using this architecture, and they're even automating their internal processes using this architecture. So it can be used in many ways. This is like a framework. So this is just flashing about EMR. So I think I have explained about EMR, how it works. So on-prem Hadoop storage is something which is coupled with the server, but here it's decoupled. Storage and compute are different. Storage is S3, which can be used as an HDFS layer, and you don't have to really retain the data on servers. You can spin up your compute, process your data, and kill it. And if you have requirements where you have to process data every minute, you can have long running clusters also. So IDC actually said in 2018 that 57% reduced cost versus on-premise. That is something EMR provides. And if you look at 5 years, there's an ROI of 342%. Gartner and Forrester also recognize that EMR is a cloud Hadoop or Spark, they call it HARC actually, leader, and then it has the highest base, both in terms of revenue and user base. So with this, I want to state that if anybody want to focus on solving their problems that are core to their business, they definitely want someone else to manage the undifferentiated heavy lifting for them. Like for example, racking, cabling, stacking, patching, maintaining all those servers. Actually, they require tremendous amount of effort and manpower, which you can possibly use in other areas of your business, which is core to you. Managing servers is probably not your core business, right? So AWS continues to innovate and find more efficient ways for you to analyze your data. We have an emerging serverless analytics stack. You can put all these systems together with zero infrastructure to manage. This lets you pay per use with close to zero cost when things are ideal. Scales automatically. Systems are highly available and fault tolerant by default. So on this diagram, you can see I have a bunch of IoT services which are serverless, devices, web sensors. Data is coming from all these sources and it's getting stored in a data lake. Again, this is just a storage. There are no servers to manage. You just put your data and then it scales automatically as the data grows. And then you only pay for what you use. It also stores your copy in 3 different availability zones, basically a bunch of data servers, bunch of data centers that are geographically apart. Then you have Glue to catalog and ETL your data as well. Then you can use serverless Athena offering through which you can just simply go and query your data. You can embed AI/ML in Athena queries as well. You can run SageMaker models and then simply do ML driven BI using QuickSight. So I will also cover this a bit in QuickSight as well in the demo. We also deliver our AI/ML services this way. Remember, I was talking about it has democratization of AI/ML, which AWS offers. So we offer GPUs and frameworks for experts. We also make higher level services for image and video analysis like transcription, translation, etc. Those are all available via APIs, and you don't have to manage anything in that. Simply put, we do a bunch of work behind the scenes, so you don't have to do anything on your side. Just focus on your business and build what is key for your business. Okay, now maybe what everyone was waiting for, demo time. Before going into the first demo, so I have 3 demos. 2 are like 14 minutes, 15 minutes kind of demo. And then this last one is short, but I think it will be very exciting for them, exciting for you guys, sorry. So if you have to process big data, right? So I was an analyst myself some time back. And then I always thought, okay, I'm good at writing SQLs, I'm good at writing code right now, but I don't want to excel in coding field. I want to make most out of my data. And that time I had very limited options from my organization to kind of have a visual tool which will help me doing data preparation and analyze it. So in my role, I was analyzing a lot of different customers' data to adapt to the product side of data model. So it required tremendous amount of effort, and especially data coming in different formats. I really wanted to have some kind of visualization tool. So of course, some people would still want to prefer writing code from scratch, but with the way market is moving and with the way innovation is happening, most of the analysts and data scientists will prefer a data preparation tool that writes codes for them. So AWS Glue Data Brew is a service that is built for data analysts and data scientists that can help them cleanse, transform, and prepare that data using 250 plus transformations which are built in. It's a recently launched service, and we still have 250 plus transformations. There are more innovations coming in this product. We will quickly look at the demo, but it solves some of the key challenges which were faced traditionally when we used to prepare data, how we look at data from different personas. It was time consuming, it was very manual, it was inefficient, and it was expensive. And the biggest problem was reusability. If I am doing something, I have done something good, how I can reuse the same thing and share it with others. So that is also something which this solves. So Glue Data Brew allows you to easily connect to your data stores and provides a visual interactive interface to explore, clean, combine, and transform raw data without any coding. We'll do a role play here to understand the demo better. Imagine there's a music app startup company, and they recently launched their app 3 months back. And they had some projections like we'll grow probably 20% month over month, because they were thinking their kind of interfacing and experience is quite unique. But that was not happening. And they hired a data analyst Anna and a data scientist Sam. So they asked the data analyst Anna, can you work with Sam to first analyze the data, what's actually happening? Can you bring up some insights? The second thing is, can you help Sam to come up with a recommendation model so we can kind of recommend our users what music they should listen to? So they have a very basic architecture. So Anna prepared this architecture actually because she has a good amount of experience in AWS, and she keeps herself up to date about latest and greatest things which are coming from AWS. So they have a bunch of data, all the 3 months of data, not from all the devices. They are collecting very limited data set just because they are experimenting today. They have this data on S3. Anna will crawl this data using catalog. Then she'll use Glue Data Brew to prepare and transform the data. She'll write it back in Parquet format. She'll again catalog that processed data and then use Athena and QuickSight to visualize the results. She's also inviting Sam. Sam is a Python savvy guy, and he knows that he spends a lot of time coding. So Anna says that, okay, I'll show you our tool. Probably it will help you. Sam says, yeah, definitely I want to look at that tool. So Anna is also sharing the entire thing which she is doing with Sam, so Sam can also learn. Okay, now let's quickly jump into the demo. I have to stop sharing for now. Let me bring up my recorded demo. So I don't usually do demo live because I don't trust the demo gods. They can sometimes be very unfair to us. Okay. Maybe the font will be very small for you, but I'll be kind of explaining everything to you. So Anna is into the AWS console and she first wants to take a look at the data itself, like how data is organized. She goes into S3 and sees there's a bucket, there's a data folder, and there's raw reference folders. So in raw folder, she has gzip compressed file. And then in reference folder, she has a JSON file. Okay. There are two types of files. Probably one is for metadata, some additional information. She then goes to Glue and she wants to check whether, okay, data is already crawled, but she wants to quickly make sure that it's pointing to the right directory. It is pointing to the data directory. And she quickly checks all these tables. Everything looks good. She quickly checks the reference data. Everything looks good. Now she wants to go to Data Brew and she shows Sam that there are a bunch of options you can connect. You can directly upload your file, connect to S3 as a data source. You can connect to Redshift. You can also connect to any store with JDBC, and then Glue Catalog, which can crawl actually catalog data from Redshift, RDS, and S3. You can also do, and there are a bunch of other options. She first registers the raw data set and she makes sure that, okay, it's the same raw data set which she's looking at. Yes, it is same. She just quickly registers the data set and then she renames it to music music data raw. Okay. She then creates the data set. She also does the same thing for reference data set and creates music data reference. She creates a new project, a workspace for herself where she wants to actually play with data. She gives the project a name. And then she selects raw data to start with. She sees that there is already a role which she can use. Otherwise, you can always go and create a new role. So it's done. She now creates a project. In a minute, she is ready with the data. Now she can see all the columns which are there with bunch of statistics at the top, including the type of column it is. Okay, good. But from a data science perspective, probably Sam would want to know more. So Anna just quickly shows some summarized information which is already available for each column here, depending on the column type, like unique values, distinct values, total values, box plot distribution, quartile ranges, mean, median, categorization distribution if it's a categorical variable. So depending on the column type, it will show you the details. She also shows that when you go to schema view, it has bunch of more information with value distribution, box plot, and data quality. Basically, you can figure out if there are invalid rows, duplicates, or let's say missing values. All these things it will be able to determine here. You have the value distribution depending on the column type. She also goes and shows profiles. This is really interesting. So you can actually profile your entire data and it will give you a lot of information about data. She creates a profiling job. She does 20,000 records and she wants to store profile in the same data folder, but under a different subdirectory. She'll store it in profiles. Although this folder doesn't exist, but the job will create this folder inside that folder, and then she uses the same role and then creates and run the job. So while the job is running, she goes back to grid view and starts showing more options to Sam. So she's okay, she shows that there is filtering option, column level transformations. You can do formatting, cleaning, extraction of values from the column. You can impute missing values, deal with invalid values, duplicates and outliers. You can split a column, merge and create a new column with your own function. There are a bunch of functions which you can apply depending on the type of the column. So for example, for a string function, math functions will not make sense, right? So math functions will be disabled when you select a string column. You can nest, pivot, group, join, union. And then in terms of test, you can already do word tokenization. Let's say if you're dealing with sentiment analysis, a very basic use case. You can scale your data. min-max normalization, z-score normalization. She leaves out mapping and she shows encoding that you can also do one hot encoding. Mapping is something which she'll probably show later to Sam, because this is also good for data scientists to kind of convert that data into machine learning format for categorical variables. So she starts doing some transformation. She really likes to see date in a much more readable format. So she duplicates the column, and then she was thinking what format she should choose might be possibly used. So what she wants to do is she wants to create a new column and then change the format and type of it. So she creates a new column because she wants to leave the original column intact. She uses device date. Okay, but wait, she immediately recognizes that she has made a mistake. She has given the column name wrong. She starts renaming it. But Sam is like quite smart. He notices that, okay, when you are at the recipe, I saw some edit option. Why can't you just go and edit the same step? Why you have to create a separate step, increase the complexity? Okay. Anna says, yes, you are learning quite fast. I should not actually do this. I should delete this step and go back to the previous step and rename the column properly. She goes back and she edits it, and then this time she gives the correct name, device date. She applies it all good. There is only one single step. Now she wants to change the format to YYYYMMDD. So she wants to apply it for all the rows. She applies it, and then you can see the step gets added to the recipe. Now she also wants to change it to integer, because working with integers in a database sometimes can be really fast. Just divide, multiply, and then you can do date, hour, and all this stuff very quickly. Then she shows mapping for the categorical variable activity type. She says that given her limited knowledge, Sam might want to use this feature as well, where you can map your categorical variables to certain categories. So for example, you can map all these things, but Sam asks, can I group certain categories into one? Anna says, yes, you can do that. You can either give it a name here, or you can use the grouping functionality. So you can select these columns and say that I want to group these two together. So just give it a label and not done. Then you can just add this new column. You can also preview and then just apply. But for the sake of this thing, she cancels it because she is not doing data science as of now. She's just showing Sam. In the meanwhile, profiling job is run. It was succeeded 5 minutes ago, actually. So you can see there are a bunch of, and Anna says that, Sam, you can see bunch of information here: mean, median, standard deviation, outliers, interquartile ranges, variance, kurtoses. So these are very good information for a data scientist, because they can do feature engineering using this. Also correlation, because they want to know if any of the variables or features in my data set are highly correlated. You usually filter out highly correlated columns because they don't provide any additional information in the machine learning process. They are redundant information. So this is very crucial. Although in this data set, nothing is highly correlated, but usually it will give you the temperature from 1 to -1 if it's correlated, and then you can simply remove those columns if you want. She also shows that there is more information per column, where you can get cardinality, outlier, sample values, distribution, z-score distribution of that. So bunch of information. She goes back to grid view. There are 3 steps which she has done so far. Now she actually wants to bring in information from the reference data set. She selects the music data reference. While this is loading, she would also want to validate what information is there she can use. So she has seen it in Glue, but she wants to just make sure. It's generating the preview. So okay, it is giving the column names and the schema and some few rows for you to absorb. Then you have bunch of options. So she assumes that most of the information is already there in the reference, so it should be perfectly matched. So she uses track ID to join these data sets. But wait, what? This is a number, this is a ABC. Will it create any problem? Yes, the tool is saying that it will create problem. So she immediately goes back and then fixes draw data set, track ID column, and she changes it to a string. Usually you should do it the other way around. The reference data should become integer. That way the join is faster actually. She chooses this, but she removes the track ID column because this is redundant information. It's also there from raw data set. She filters this out and then she just click finishes. Now we should see the additional 2 columns in the data set. Artist name and track name is here actually. But there is one problem. If you look at all the total values of the columns, it has reduced from 500 to 483. It's a quick way of checking actually. She immediately realizes that maybe there are some values missing in the reference data set. So she actually does a left join and then recreates. Now all the columns are fixed. So it should be fixed for activity type and track name as well. Okay, but wait, what? It's still 483. She goes and look at some of the sample values and observes that there are null values in both of these columns. She then wants to treat these missing values with something more explainable. So she goes and fills out these missing values with a custom value unknown. You can do a bunch of things, but Anna is using unknown here. She applies it, and then you should see that all the null values in the column are replaced with unknown. Yes. She does the same operation with track name, and you can see the total value is again 500 right now. So she is also looking at the lineage. Okay, so far she has done this much. She is actually in the project right now, and then the recipe is getting prepared. She goes back to the project, and what she wants to do it, she wants to create a job now and run the job for the entire data set. She creates a job, give the jobs a name, and then she decides that she has to use Parquet format because it's good for analytics. It's a columnar format. And then she uses the same bucket data folder, but she will use a different folder to store the results. So she actually does the process. She doesn't want to do any compression as of now, but there are options to compress your data as well. You want to write the output in another location as well, you can do that in the same job. She chooses the role and then she creates another job. She opens the job and wants to go into lineage again, and then okay, now new step is added. She goes to S3 directly. So processed folder has been created actually. The job is running within 1 minute 15 seconds. The job is run, and we should see the data here. So it has created a folder and then file in the Parquet format as we expected. Now she wants to crawl this data set also because she wants to have that data cataloged into Glue catalog, so she can directly use that data for querying and visualizing. So now the crawler has added process data as well as profile data. It has a partition because remember there was a folder also before the Parquet file. So it is being treated as a partition as of now. So now she'll go to QuickSight where she has already created a dashboard, and she would kind of show Sam that these are the insights she's looking at. She goes to QuickSight and opens the dashboard she has created. She is forecasting the trends, the music listening, the tune-ins by date for the last 3 months. And then she's observed very strange thing that usually people who are running actually listens to music a lot. This is quite less. Traveling is more, but that may be because of the data which has been collected from devices. It's not all devices. Imagine Dragons is quite popular. It also says that either you have a lot of tracks from this artist or this artist is really popular. In terms of trends, it sees that it's pretty flat. So the management was expecting 20% month over month growth. That's clearly not there anywhere. Right? It's kind of flat, and that's what probably Sam has been hired to do a model to give recommendations to user to increase the user experience. Sam also asked, can you show me how you connected to the data? She goes to the analysis where she created all this. She edits the data set and quickly shows Sam that it's a direct query. It's not into in-memory engine of QuickSight. And then it's directly coming from Athena as a source. So it's reading data from S3. Okay, we are done with the first demo. Let me go back to the slides again and put some context for the second demo. So second demo is around Redshift. I think Redshift, you know, it's a first and most popular cloud data warehouse. It's based on MPP, massively parallel processing technology, which can process exabytes of data across data warehouse, data lakes, and operational databases as well. It's with RA3 type compute model, you can have separate storage, basically unlimited compute capacity and storage. You can scale them independently, even in the data warehouse. With Aqua, you have 10 times faster query performance. It's a hardware accelerated cache, which no other cloud vendor is providing. Then you have security, both in terms of certifications and what you can do with data inside it, even in terms of auditing. It provides you 1/10 of traditional data warehouses at almost $1,000 per terabyte per year. I have worked with some of the MPP warehouses in the past, and the pricing can go anywhere from $10,000 per terabyte per year to 25,000. So when we look at data warehousing, especially Redshift, we innovate basically at using three pillars. First and foremost, low cost and best value. You should get the maximum benefit at the lowest possible cost. It should be performant, it should be scalable, and it should be fast and self-tuned. So you don't have to spend a lot of DBA resources on top of it, basically none, to be honest. Then you have on the top of it, you should be able to do data warehousing with the lakehouse architecture. Remember, I showed you a bunch of services, so it should actually talk to all those things. So not just provide data warehousing functionality, but also be able to talk to other data sources so that you can do more and more with just your data warehouse if you're doing. Today, we are going to just focus on the federated query. Just to quickly showcase that Redshift scored 5 out of 5. That's the maximum score in the market presence category, use cases, ability to execute, and roadmap criteria and Forrester Wave. Okay, what we'll do in the demo. So let's assume a fictitious company, Octank, who is storing their orders data, last 7 days of data in their Aurora Postgres instance. This is their transactional DB. They're also having a read replica where they are just directing all the read requests from that so that write transactions aren't affected here. They are using a Bastion host to access these resources securely. Business team is using QuickSight and connecting to Redshift. So Redshift has 13 months of data within it, and but excluding last 7 days of data. So last 7 days of data here, 13 months of data here, and the rest of the historical data is in their data lake. They're also using a SQL client to connect and fire queries. So let's do some role play here as well. Let me quickly go to the demo. Again, this is recorded. As you know, I don't trust doing it live. Just give me a second. Let me pull that up. Okay. So the context is like this. So business team is actually using Redshift and QuickSight to do their dashboarding. And they're looking at last 13 months of data, barring latest 7 days. And then they are doing forecasting on the basis of that. They're also doing quarter over quarter KPI, but they want to do year over year KPIs, and they do want to forecast a bit more better with more data inside it. So they go to Isabel from IT, like Bob is a business person. He goes to Isabel from IT and says that, can you give us access to last 5 years of data? So Anna is someone who knows Redshift in and out. And she, Bob was expecting a huge turnaround time, but she says that, okay, I should be able to do it within the next couple of hours. So what Isabel does is, Isabel is from IT. She goes into the Redshift using the SQL editor, and then she sees what table has this data. So, okay, orders has the data. Let's quickly check if it has last 30 minutes of data and up till when. So this demo was recorded on 3rd of August 2020. So it has data from 1st of June 2019 to 26th of July 2020. She goes to S3 and checks how this data is organized into S3. She goes to orders history table. Data is actually there from 1992 until 2019. And the data is already there until May month. Okay. The data set is also cataloged inside a logical database which sits on top of S3 in Glue catalog, that is XYZ, RSDemo, GDC. I think I've already explained Glue enough. You would understand. So she also wants to check the crawler. If crawler is properly configured, she quickly checks it. Okay, S3 is a data source and it's pointing to orders history folder in the bucket. You can create a new role, but yeah, the role is already there. So it's pointing to XYZ. By the way, you can also do it from Glue tables directly, but she just want to make sure that the crawler is configured. So for the sake of the demo, that crawler was already run, and it has a table which it has created for orders underscore history. She goes into that table, and as I said, you can also do it from here. It's pointing to the correct directory. It has these many records, and it is partitioned by year and month, which is the same folder structure in S3 as well. So good. Now she goes and creates an external schema so that it can talk to S3. Now she's still doing it in Redshift. So she creates an external schema, and now this is pointing to the database XYZ RSDemo GDC, which we saw on Glue catalog. She sees and that, okay, this schema is created, and then order history table is actually there, which is also there in the Glue catalog. Now, I also want to show you with this demo that she can actually unload the data also. So just to quickly highlight how to unload the data using in a different directory using the unload command in Parquet format. She goes and quickly checks, okay, so order history demo is there, but there is a shortcoming to it. You have to catalog this data yourself using the Glue crawler. That means you have to run the crawler again. There's a new method which is called create external table as a select, and then you can create external table and then partition it by year and month. With this, the table will also get created by itself. You don't have to run the crawler. So she's doing for the same month, but in a different folder. So this data is actually going from Redshift to S3, and then she sees that, okay, it's the same format, but at the same time, it's also available in Glue. Let's check. So see, order history demo 2 table is already created. Same number of records which were exported, unloaded basically from Redshift to S3, and it is all done in Parquet format, and you can automate all this process. This is one time, but what if want you do regularly for every month, right? So you can just simply use insert select statement, and then it will use the same metadata information from the table. So it has done just for July month. We can quickly check here. So you see July month is also created. We can also check in Glue catalog. Let's refresh the page, and then we'll see it has also added July month partition, which is all good. So this method is much better. Now she creates a late binding view so that business can have 5 years of data, which is a combination of Redshift data and data from S3 data lake. A late binding view is a view which doesn't ties back to the original underlying resources. If you delete those resources, view will still exist. It will not complain. So now she has created the view. Let's check if the view has been created. So the view has been created. She then quickly goes and check how much data she can see inside the view, because this is the view she'll be exposing to business users. She'll give access to business users for this view. So the query is running. So now it has data from 2015 until 26th July 2020, which is the latest data in Redshift. But business users, business users duplicated the dashboard. They were able to do using last 5 years of data, year over year KPI, but they have more requirements. They asked Isabel, Bob, the business owner, that actually we want to have all the to-date data, like data to date. We want last 5 years of data, but also the last 7 days of data, which we don't have access to, because some of the KPIs, we really can't see them changing day over day. It affects the way we operate. So some of the KPIs in it. So Bob goes to Isabel, and then he asks the request that this is the request. Can you do it? She says it's pretty simple. I will give you access to the transactional database for the last 7 days of data. Bob says, oh, but will it not stress our operational database if you directly give access to us? She says, no, I'm going to actually give it via Redshift, and then Redshift is connecting to the read replica of the transactional database. It's not going to affect the writer node in any way. So she goes there, and then what she does is, before that, she wants to go into the terminal. Remember the Bastion host? She's using that terminal to securely log in into that. She wants to check what's the actual table which is being used. So she's pretty smart with databases. You can see she's not even going into the command prompt of Postgres. She's directly executing it from the terminal itself. So she executes a query and sees that, okay, there's the orders table. Let's check if this is the one having last 7 days of data. She fires a query again, and then she's checking from which date to which date there are orders. She executed it. So it has data from 27th July to 3rd of August 2020. And the count of orders is 43,535. Okay. She then goes back here. She does the same exact process, but this time, instead of pointing Redshift to Glue data catalog, it's pointing to Aurora database, their transactional database. So she executes the query. And by the way, Postgres details are coming from secrets manager. It's not hard coded into the query. So they are stored in secrets manager, which is a secure way of storing your credentials. So she executes the query, and she sees that the data is not created. Oh, she's looking at the wrong place. She refreshes again and see that, okay, EXTPG Aurora, which we just created, is there. And there are all the tables which she saw in the schema there in Aurora, the Postgres instance. She quickly wants to check the same thing from here, because now she's accessing it from Redshift. So see, the order count has changed. The dates are same because the orders are still coming in. It was 43535. It has become 43536. That means she is able to query the data live. She again creates a late binding view, but this time she clubs data from Postgres, last 7 days data, Redshift, and data lake. So they have last 5 years of data to date. She again checks the view, and then there is this view orders all view which is created. She then executes a query to see if the data count shown is correct or not. So okay, so data is from 1st Jan 2015 to 3rd of August 2020. She then exposes the view to the business users, and then business users duplicated the view and created this view. So they have all the visibility on all the orders to date, and they are doing forecasting much better. They see a dip in the month of August 2020 because the demo was recorded on 3rd of August and the month is still going, right? So that's why there is a dip. But all good. I think in no time, because of the expertise of familiarity of Isabel of Redshift feature, she was able to do it. Okay. Then I have like one small quick demo, because I've shown you forecasting a lot. Let me show you one small demo about QuickSight. Let me go back to the slides. I'll just need 3-4 more minutes. So we have done this. So quick thing about QuickSight. So QuickSight is a first BI service built for the cloud with pay per session pricing and ML insight. So that means you don't have to secure licenses upfront for your users. So it depends on if your users are using it, then only you have to pay it. Otherwise, no. It's serverless. It's highly scalable. It can auto scale and give you the same performance experience, even if you are 10 users or 10,000 users, and it happens in minutes. You can create dashboards. You can embed dashboards using QuickSight. You can take the dashboards, even the writing or editing experience to your own portals. You can integrate to a bunch of services. I've included a couple of videos in the links in the additional resources section that you can use. These are some of the sample dashboards which I just wanted to highlight. A customer 360 in a telco, a cohort analysis in any industry basically. This is an audit dashboard from an automotive consulting. This is a education sector dashboard, and this is a hospitality sector dashboard. So QuickSight Q is also something which I'll show you. It is a ML powered natural language capability in Amazon QuickSight, where you can ask QuickSight questions in simple plain English, and then it will return you the insights. So this is something which we'll see, because some of the business users don't want to get themselves familiarized with the data model, like dragging and dropping and understanding data. They understand business. They just want to come in and ask simple business related questions. So, okay, with this, let's quickly jump into the demo, which is very short, but okay. Okay. So here is a quick site analysis page, and you will see I'll first show you how to do forecasting with just click of a button. Udo in the next session will show you how to do your own forecasting model using the AI services we have. But this one, if you want to do, it's real quick, and then it uses random cut forest algorithm in the backend. If you want to read more about it, it's all public, you can read. So see, with one simple click, I added the forecast, and then it gives you a bunch of options to do that. I can also do what if analysis. If I understand my business and I predict that, okay, maybe at this point in time, January 2019, my business KPI would be like this, my profit would be this, then what will happen? So you can see it gives you nice the actual projection with respect to data and based on the value you entered. So it gives you nice what if forecasting. I'll also show you QuickSight Q real quick. So I don't want to play with data actually. I don't want to go into analysis and create something for me. I have one business question and I want to see top 5 physicians. Just a second. It was too quick actually. Okay, just a second. Okay, just one more minute. So business users might want to just ask question, and then you can see they can ask like give me top 5 physicians that have seen the most number of patients. So you will see physician and patients get highlighted here. So it has identified that these are business entities and probably present in data. It gets you the result. I also want to see revenue breakdown by hospital, but I don't like this distribution. I want to change the chart type. I change the chart type. If I don't like the results, I can do a thumbs down, and this is ML driven capability. So over time, QuickSight Q will learn that it has to improve responses, and you'll see the improvement over time. So this was the quick third demo. I think Udo will cover forecasting much more elaborately in the next session, but let me come back to the slides real quick. So I have added bunch of resources here for you to take a look at. You will be able to, I think, get the deck, and then you should use these resources to learn more about the demos. The Redshift Federation demo is available in much more detail, where I have a YouTube video talking about best practices and when you should use it. Okay, before actually diving into Q&A, can we have the last poll question, please? If you can help me answer this question, I think it would be okay. Okay, this is okay. I think, yeah.
Because the last question that you would like to ask, right, is embedded in question 2. So I think it's timely also for the audience to help fill up a feedback form. We value your feedback very much for us to take it in and to improve on our next few sessions. Yeah, and would like for you guys to support us by filling up this form. And for Vika, specifically on question 2, we want to know more about AWS Analytics and AI ML services to deliver business outcomes. Please help to fill in this question as well.
Thank you, Pai. So please fill this feedback form with all the questions, and then I don't know how much time we have left, probably a couple of minutes. We can leave this for Q&A.
Yeah.
In the meantime, maybe, yeah, Udo, maybe you can moderate it probably. Meanwhile, people are answering the poll. We can also take questions if there are any.
Yes. Yeah, I think we have about 7 minutes. So anyone who has question, please just feel free to type in the chat box. Yeah. Okay, I haven't seen any questions so far. So maybe I do have questions because
yeah.
So yeah, if you ever work with any of the startup customers, especially those probably in logistics, transportation, supply chain space, what are the typical challenges faced by these startups or organizations to actually adopt the like data-driven infrastructure, like lakehouse architecture, for example? Yeah, is that cost? Is that talent? Is that just lack of executive support? Yeah, what's that? And maybe in your experience, what's the best way to handle it?
I mean, I have worked with a few customers in this domain, and the biggest challenge I have seen is around integration points, where you have like every vendor is having their own type of data set. Probably they are bringing the same kind of data in, but in various different formats, a little bit here and there. So integration is one of the challenge, and then how you kind of streamline this data set and then use these data as per your use case, right? So you may have use case where, remember the metrics I was showing, where there are opportunities for improvement. So all those use cases can be powered with that data set. But oftentimes, I mean, not saying everyone does it, but sometimes people get fixated on a very specific problem and then they ignore rest of the areas. But the idea here is to look at data holistically and build use cases for everything from a single data place. Don't create different branches for creating different use case. Power everything from a single platform, and that would actually help organizations in the long run to manage and then grow on the same platform and innovate.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Vikas. So that leads to another question. So, yeah. So you mentioned that there are many use cases, and we should just probably explore to some exploration on those use cases. But there's some cost, even if we are using data lakes, which is low cost in terms of storage. There will be some cost in terms of data ingestion and storage. So, how do we determine like which use case should go first, like which data that we should start capturing, and like how do I determine which data will be valuable in the next like maybe few years?
Yeah, actually, there is an entire session which I did in the last summit on Customer 360. So when we think about a use case, right, that's a very valid point. We always think we can't do everything at once. We have to always work backwards from the use case and what will make the most impact. Identify the data sources which needs to be in. Not every data source might be important on day one, right? So we have to look at what impact the data is making and then think about it. The other important aspect is frequency also matters. If the use case is about accessing data every 10 minutes or so, and then you're only bringing it on a daily basis, the entire use case fails. So we have to look at the impact. We have to work backwards with the use case and also look at frequency.
Thanks, Vikas. Yeah, is there any question from the audience? Any question? I know that we are standing between you and lunch, but yeah, any questions while we have the expert here, feel free to throw in.
Yeah, please feel free to ask any question. We still have some time. Even, you know, there are different, I think in the question you might have got it in the second question, that there are different kind of stages where your analytics stack or roadmap may be. Basically, AWS can offer you help in all those areas, whether you have started, whether you're already there. Let's say in the Pure, which we got during modern data platform, most of you are expecting some sort of data monetization also, right? So we can also come in and start brainstorming with you, with our experience working in the same domain with a lot of customers, that how can you monetize your data and what should be the approach. So that is something which you can also do. So we can also take a bit of consultative approach for you here.
Yeah. While waiting for potential questions to pop up, maybe one more, because so as startups, we may actually explore multiple cloud providers, especially when it comes to data analytics. Just want to know if you have that insights, like in the next few years ahead, where's the direction going to in terms of AWS data side, like data analytics, visualization, like, yeah, what's going to be there?
I mean, okay, my personal opinion is working with so many clients, going hybrid is okay, because maybe you are already doing and you have made a lot of investments there. Even multi-cloud is okay. It's case to case basis. Like I'm working with some clients where they have built something on other cloud providers and it was a huge investment of time and effort from them. So of course, but maybe they were not happy or whatever, they want to do certain pieces of it in AWS. We truly support that. But my personal opinion is, the more you diversify where you have to focus your efforts, the more challenging it becomes for you in the long run, because now you have to have people with different skills on multiple platforms. You have to move data here and there a lot. So if you identify someone, my personal opinion would be to recommend, because I mean, just talking from AWS perspective, I don't think in terms of breadth and depth, AWS is anywhere less than anyone. It is it has everything what customers need. So definitely multi-cloud is something which can be worked with if you have an existing investment or use cases. But in the long run, just try to partner with one and then innovate from there. Like, treat them as a partner, not just as a vendor.
Okay, I think that's good as a closing message. Thanks, Vikas. I think we are at 12:40 now, Singapore time. So maybe Pei, I believe you may want to mention about the next, and probably share the link.
Yeah, thanks, Yudo, and thank you so much, Vikas, for the very detailed presentation and even the demos on Redshift and QuickSight. Yeah, I personally have picked up quite a bit on data analytics today. So just to inform everyone that after this lunch break at 2 p.m., we'll be having our third session. And the third session will be a guided hands-on workshop for you to learn how to build your own forecasting model with Amazon Forecast. So now I'm pasting the link over here. So this link is for the third session. Please join us at 2 p.m. for the session here. Yeah.
Hey, I just want to say thank you to everyone for bearing with me for 1.5 years. I was speaking non-stop like a bullet train. I hope your ears are not bleeding and you got something useful from the session.
Yeah, that's a big data, Vikas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. With that, I'll drop off. Happy forecasting in the next session.
Thanks so much, Vikas, and thanks, Yudo. Thank you, everyone, for
guys.
joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.